The Battle of Leros was the central event of the Dodecanese campaign of the Second World War, and is widely used as an alternate name for the whole campaign. The Italian garrison in Leros was strengthened by British forces on 15 September 1943. The battle began with German air attacks on 26 September, continued with the landings on 12 November, and ended with the capitulation of the Allied forces 4 days later. Background: the island of Leros is part of the Dodecanese island group in the southeastern Aegean Sea, which had been under Italian occupation since the Italo-Turkish War. During Italian rule, Leros, with its excellent deep-water port of Lacchi, was transformed into a heavily fortified aeronautical and naval base, the corregidor of the Mediterranean, as Mussolini boasted. The island was base for some Italian naval units, specifically, in September 1943, 4th Squadriglia Caccia Torpediniera with the sole destroyer Euro 3 Flotilla Mars with 2 motor torpedo boats and 6 Mars 39 minesweeper flotilla with 11 boats, 9 minor units, 7 merchant ships, 2 mine layers and 3 Italian-built Marine F-Arpram of German project. After the fall of Greece in April 1941 and the Allied loss of the island of Crete in May, Greece and its many islands were occupied by German and Italian forces. With the surrender of Italy on 8 September 1943, however, the Greek islands, which were seen as strategically vital by Churchill, became reachable for the first time since the loss of Crete. The United States was skeptical about the operation, which it saw as an unnecessary diversion from the main front in Italy. This was confirmed at the Quebec Conference, where it was decided to divert all available shipping from the eastern Mediterranean. Nonetheless, the British went ahead, albeit with a severely scaled-down force. In addition to that, air cover was minimal, with the U.S. and British aircraft based in Cyprus and the Middle East, a situation which was to be exacerbated by the withdrawal of the American units in late October in order to support operations in Italy. Prelude: initial Allied and German moves after the Italian government had signed an armistice. The Italian garrisons on most of the Dodecanese either wanted to change sides and fight alongside the Allies or just return to their homes. The Allies attempted to take advantage of the situation, but the Germans were ready. As the Italian surrender became apparent, German forces, based largely in mainland Greece, were rushed to many of the major islands to gain control. The most important such force, the Sturmdivision Rhodos, swiftly neutralized the garrison of Rhodes, denying the island's 3 airfields to the Allies. By mid-September, however, the British 234th Infantry Brigade under Major General F.G.R. Britarus, coming from Malta, and SBS and LRDG detachments had secured the islands of Kos, Kalymnos, Samos, Leros, Sima, and Astypalaia, supported by ships of the British and Greek navies and 2 RAF Spitfire squadrons on Kos. The Germans quickly mobilized in response. General-Lieutenant Friedrich Wilhelm Müller, the commander of the 22nd Infantry Division at Crete, was ordered to take Kos and Leros on 23 September. The British forces on Kos, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel LRF Kenyon, numbered about 1,500 men, 680 of whom were from the 1st BN Durham Light Infantry, 120 men from 11th Parachute Battalion, a number of men from the SBS and the rest being mainly RAF personnel, and California, 3,500 Italians. On 3 October, the Germans effected amphibious and airborne landings, reaching the outskirts of the island's capital later that day. The British withdrew under cover of night, and surrendered the next day. The fall of Kos was a major blow to the Allies, since it deprived them of vital air cover. The Germans captured 1,388 British and 3,145 Italian prisoners. On the 3rd of October, German troops executed the captured Italian commander of the island, Carl Felice Leggio, and 101 of his officers, according to Hitler's the 11th of September order to execute captured Italian officers. Allied forces. The Italian garrison of Leros numbered about 7,602 men, under the command of Captain Luigi Mascherpa. The rest of the Italian forces consisted in an infantry battalion, and 2 heavy MG companies and 20 Air Force reservists. The vast majority of these men, 6,065, plus an additional 697 militarized personnel, belonged to the Royal Italian Navy. As Leros was mainly a naval base, only about 1,000 of them were first-line troops, while the others mainly belonged to technical and service units and to the anti-aircraft defense. The island's defenses included 13 coastal batteries, armed with 19 152mm guns, 5 102mm guns, and 20 76mm guns, and 12 anti-aircraft and dual-purpose batteries armed with 14 102mm guns, 6 90mm guns, and 28 76mm guns, plus 3 37mm machine guns, 15 20mm machine guns and 31 13 2mm machine guns. Most of these, however, were badly protected from air assaults and, accordingly, would suffer badly from Luftwaffe attacks. As for the ships, the clauses of the armistice determined that all Italian ships were to reach Malta or other Allied-controlled bases. But Mascherpa persuaded the British commands to allow his ships to stay in Leros, since they would be of more use there, in case of likely German attack. The only aircrafts available were 7 KZ-501, which however were soon destroyed by the Luftwaffe or transferred to Leipzig. Following the fall of Rhodes, some men from that island reached Leros, and Mascherpa assumed command of all Italian naval forces in the Aegean Sea. Mascherpa meanwhile reorganized the anti-aircraft defense. On the 12th of September, a delegation of British officers met Mascherpa to verify the island's defences and to inquire about what relations would be established between Italian and British troops. Mascherpa did not go too far in his replies, since the terms of the armistice were still rather vague. On the following day, more British officers arrived, including Major George Jellicoe and Colonel Turbule, who was disappointed by the state of the defences, especially the anti-aircraft ones. Meanwhile, it had been decided to shoot at any German plane that would fly over Leros. On the 13th of September, the Germans offered Mascherpa to surrender with honorable conditions, but he refused. On the 17th of September, the small Italian garrison of Alamea, after leaving their island on board 2 fishing boats, reached Leros with their weapons. And on the same day, the first 400 British reinforcements landed on Leros. On the 20th of September, Captain Mascherpa, upon hearing that British Major General Frank G. R. Briterus was coming to Leros, asked Supermarina for an advancement to the rank of Rear Admiral, which was granted. On the same day, Briterus reached Leros with 600 more men, food and equipment. Briterus published a proclamation where he stated that he was in command, and all Italian commands were subordinated to him. This immediately created frictions with Mascherpa, who was confirmed in command of all Italian forces in Leros as well as of the civilian population, but subordinated to Briterus. Both officers asked their commands for reinforcements, food and ammunitions, but little arrived. By October, the British forces on the island of Leros numbered California 3,000 men of the 2nd BN the Royal Irish Fusiliers, the 4th BN the Buffs, the 1st BN the King's Own Royal Regiment, and a company of the 2nd BN Queen's Own Royal West Kent Regiment, the whole force under Brigadier Robert Tilney, who assumed command on the 5th of November. Initially, the British had planned to secure the high ground of the island's interior, but Brig Tilney insisted on a forward defence on the coastline, which had the effect of spreading his forces too thinly. The Air Force units detailed for this operation were not large. Apart from the troop-carrying and transport Dakotas, there were 2 day and 2 night Beaufighter squadrons, a Wellington torpedo bomber squadron, 3 Baltimore and 1 Hudson general reconnaissance squadrons, and a detachment of photographic reconnaissance Spitfires. This force was based on the mainland of Africa and in Cyprus. In addition, 2 heavy bomber squadrons, No. 178 Squadron RAF and No. 462 Squadron RAF of No. 240 Wing RAF equipped with a mix of Liberators and Halifaxes, and a wing of IX United States Bomber Command took part at a later stage. The only real offensive force were just the 2 squadrons No. 7 SAF and No. 74 RAF, both equipped with Spitfires. In all, the number of aircraft used amounted to 144 fighters and 116 heavy, medium and torpedo bombers. Of this total of 260 aircraft, 115 were to be lost. German forces. The German forces assembling for Unternehmen and Leopard under the command of Generalleutnant Müller comprised 3 Infantry Regiment 440, 2 IR-16 and 2 IR-65 of the 22nd Infantry Division, the parachutists of IFJR-2, and an amphibious commando company of the Brandenburg Division. The invasion force assembled in harbors in Kos and Kalymnos, with reserves and heavy equipment waiting to be airlifted around Athens. 2 groups with Ju-87D3 dive bombers were available for close air support. Group of Schlechtgeschwader 3 flew from their base in Megara, and 2 Group from Argos and later Rhodos. 2 Group of Kampfgeschwader 51 with Ju-88 were available for air strikes. On the night between 6 and 7 October, the Royal Navy cruisers Sirius and Penelope and 2 destroyers attacked and destroyed a German troop convoy in the Astypalaia Channel. These troops were meant as a reinforcement to the force tasked with Operation Leopard, so the destruction of the convoy caused the operation to be delayed. Bombing and preparations. Starting on the 26th of September, after days of dropping threatening leaflets, the Luftwaffe unleashed continuous attacks on Leros, enjoying complete air superiority. On that day, Ju-88 bombers sank the Greek destroyer Vasilisa Olga, the British destroyer Intrepid, and the Italian Mars 534 inside the harbour of Lacchi, the submarine base, the barracks of the naval base, the workshops, and 4 of the 5 fuel depots were destroyed. 7 German bombers were shot down. Between the 26th of September and the 11th of November, Leros was continuously subjected to heavy bombings. In addition to military objectives, also the villages and towns, especially Leros and Lacchi, suffered heavy damage. 10% of coastal batteries, 30% of anti-torpedo boat batteries and 20% of anti-aircraft guns were destroyed. Hospitals had to be transferred in caves. The air base was bombed and rendered useless on the 27th of September. On the 3rd of October, the Italian destroyer Euro was sunk in Partheni Bay. On the 5th of October, the mine Leo Legnano, the auxiliary landing ship Porto di Roma, the steamer Prodan and 1 Italian MFP were sunk in Lacchi harbour, followed on the 7th of October by the Italian steamer Ivoria. On the 12th of October, the Italian steamer Bucintoro was sunk inside a floating dry dock. The Italian motor torpedo boat MS-15 was sunk by airstrike on Leros on the 22nd of October, while MS-26 had been lost to grounding on the 9th of October. The anti-aircraft batteries were prime targets for the bombings. They often ran out of ammunition, or became fatigued from continuous firing. But the dive bombing technique used by the Stukas allowed the AA crews to foresee where bombs would fall, and to shoot at the bombers during the maneuver which followed the dive, when they were particularly vulnerable. The Italian battery on Mount Patella was able to shoot down 8 bombers by taking advantage of this weak point. Kalymnos had fallen to the Germans on the 7th of September, and 3 days later the batteries of Leros had started firing on that island. This continuous firing, along with the constant airstrikes with the guns, and seriously depleted the ammunition reserves. The local command asked for more ammunitions, and the destroyer Artillery and Velite were sent from Taranto, but most of their cargo of ammunition was unloaded during their stop in Alexandria, so only a minimal part of them was eventually delivered to Leros. In the last part of October, Italian and British submarines made several supply runs to Leros. HMS Rockwell, HMS Seven, the Italian submarines Zoe, Attribution, Filippo Corridoni and Ciro Menotti. Overall, the submarines brought to Leros 17 men, 225 tons of supplies, 12 40mm Bofors guns, and 1 jeep. Aircrafts were also used for transport of supplies. Despite all efforts, ammunitions were still scarce, whereas food and medicines would last for many months. On the night between 24 and the 25th of October, HMS Eclipse, while carrying part of 4th Battalion, a Royal East Kent's Buffs, along with HMS Petard, struck a mine and sank with the loss of 253 men. About 300 survivors of the battalion reached Leros on the 30th of October. On the 29th of October, HMS Unsparing sank the German steamer Ingeborg S. Office-Dipolaya. Between 1 and the 6th of November, while German forces were being concentrated for the attack, the German air offensive was temporarily halted. During the same period, ships and submarines brought to Leros another 1,280 men and 213 tons of supplies, including ammunitions. On the 3rd of November, German landing crafts were concentrated in Lorium, and between 6 and the 10th of November they were transferred to Kos and Kalymnos. On the 5th of November, Brigadier Robert Tilney arrived in Leros and assumed command. Also Major General H.R. Hall arrived, and replaced Britaris, who left for Alexandria. Mashapa was not forwarded of the substitution. He was asked to go to Cairo to discuss the situation of the island, but he refused, fearing that he would not be allowed to go back to Leros to lead the defense. Relations between Mashapa and Tilney were tense from the beginning. Upon arrival, Tilney stated that the Italian forces would not take part in any counterattack or have any initiative, relegating them to tasks of fixed coastal defense, and put each sector of the defense under a British colonel. The British commando even asked for Mashapa to be substituted, and Supermarina decided to replace him with Captain Deretti. But this was never carried out due to subsequent events. On the 7th of November, the Luftwaffe bombings started again. Over the next 5 days, a total of 187 German bombers carried out 40 raids over the islands, especially targeting the batteries located on the eastern part of the island and those in the central and southern part, as well as the anti-aircraft and coastal defense command in the area of Laki and Mount Maravilla, where British troops were concentrated. These last raids worsened the wear of the guns, disrupted communication routes and caused further consumption of ammunition. A British ammunition depot near Laki was hit and blew up, causing more damage.